Imagine you're a business owner of a small place selling, let's say, pizza. One day, a local politician comes into your shop. We'll refer to the politician by, well, let's just pick a random name and call him Ronnie. Ronnie says there's been talk of new zoning regulations that would make it difficult for you to continue using a vacant space behind your shop as much needed parking for your customers and employees. Without this lot, your business will be severely harmed because you're on a busy street and there's no other parking for about a half a mile. But good news for you, Ronnie says, I can help you out. You just give me a little taste, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen. I'll protect you. Or what about this scenario? Same small business, small pizza shop. New proposed zoning regulations are definitely going to pass, so you go to Ronnie, who can help clear this up by getting you an exemption so you can continue using the lot. But he kind of blows you off, telling you he's really busy with lots of other more pressing matters and just doesn't see how he can make it a priority anytime soon. It's quite clear to you what this means. There's an election right around the corner after all, and you know it's much more likely you'll be able to get the ball rolling if you just grease the wheels a little bit by contributing to Ronnie's re-election campaign and super PAC. It's pretty clear what the implications are here, and what will happen to you if you don't pay that money. Both of these scenarios are similar. You need to pay someone you shouldn't have to pay to avoid something bad happening to your business. The difference is one is clearly an illegal bribery and extortion scheme, the other perfectly legal campaign contributions. In both though, one thing is clear, you stop paying the money, you risk losing your exemption. Okay, so how does this relate in any way whatsoever to Disney? Well, I'm glad you asked. Don't worry, I'm getting there. Florida Republicans passed legislation at the urging of Governor Ron DeSantis, who signed it on Friday, April 22nd, revoking Disney's special district status that had been in place since the late 1960s that essentially allowed Disney to self-govern the Walt Disney World area in terms of things like zoning, infrastructure, and emergency services. The merits of the special status Disney enjoyed or the decision to revoke it are not what I'm focusing on here, but rather the events that led to the legislation. Legislation with major implications, but which passed in just a few days with zero debate. Now, why did they do this? Because Disney came out against legislation prohibiting discussions of sexual orientation or gender identity in schools at certain grade levels, what opponents have referred to as the Don't Say Gay bill and now law. Okay, so in retaliation for Disney saying they disagree with the law they passed, Florida Republicans passed another law specifically attacking them. That's not my interpretation. They've said this very explicitly. At least if we take all of this at face value, which for the sake of argument we will, at least for the moment. But why this specific action? Let's take a closer look at what may be behind all this, what may be driving it. The reason most frequently cited is that Disney has become too woke. Yes, woke. Whatever the hell that means. And before you trolls start commenting,
Stupid idiot, doesn't even know what woke means, what a moron.
I invite you to first offer your own definition if you can. Should be quite illuminating. But this whole woke thing doesn't quite add up. I mean, a lot of people, particularly in the online right, have been whining ad nauseum about Disney being too woke for years now, going all the way back to the release of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, or at least that's when it really seemed to blow up. And now this sentiment may have finally worked its way through more mainstream conservatives in the Republican Party, and they're just now putting a major emphasis on it to play to their base of support. But still, these actions aren't what you would typically see. They aren't really proportionate to what Disney is being charged with. This is the kind of thing that's typically used as a political talking point. And if that's all it was, it's not something I'd even be talking about right now. It's not something that politicians typically pass retaliatory legislation over. So it seems to me there's gotta be something else going on. Besides, targeting a specific person or company because they say something you disagree with kinda sounds like the so-called cancel culture Republicans are always railing against. And using the power of the government to do it sounds like big government overreach. And they're certainly against that. So that couldn't possibly be it. Another reason that's been given is that Disney took a position against a law of the state, and that's just something they shouldn't do. Okay, so they're saying companies shouldn't be engaging in political speech. There's just one tiny little problem with this line of reasoning. It doesn't make any sense. Companies do this all the time. In fact, companies engaging in political speech is pretty much standard practice. Companies take positions not only on specific laws and policies that may impact them, but on various social issues. Because they believe in the causes? Perhaps, but it's often simply a branding and PR exercise to make themselves look good in the eyes of their customers. Their businesses, they want to maximize profit, and so they're going to do whatever it takes to do that. But in addition to taking specific positions, companies also engage in political speech by giving to politicians through PACs and paying for lobbying efforts. In fact, Disney themselves have for years paid millions of dollars in political contributions, especially in Florida because their interests are so heavily tied to the state, being the home of one of their major theme parks. And in Florida, the vast majority of this money has gone to Republicans, including over $100,000 in 2021 given to DeSantis' PAC. The fact is that companies like Disney have always taken positions on legislation, like when Disney objected to a bill that would have held hotels liable if they didn't take sufficient measures to prevent human trafficking, or when they pushed for a special carve-out in legislation targeting social media companies because they didn't want it to impact Disney+. Just to name two of many, many examples. And Republicans have never really had a problem with any of it. Until now, all of a sudden, speech is an issue. So is the position of Republicans that money is speech, but taking a position on a piece of legislation is not? Are they saying that money is speech, but speech isn't speech? Or are they saying this is different because it's no longer a hypothetical bill, it's now a law, and so companies can no longer criticize it? On its face, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. After all, if giving money is considered protected speech, as the Supreme Court has ruled, then taking positions on laws is certainly also protected speech. And using the power of the government to punish someone for engaging in protected speech seems like a likely candidate to be considered an unconstitutional violation of the First Amendment. One of the main goals here seems to be intimidation, to send a message to other companies. Speak out against us and we'll punish you. But do they want those same companies to stop donating money to support their campaigns? Definitely not. And this brings us around to the other major component I want to put the spotlight on. What else did Disney do when they spoke out against the law? They announced they were pausing all campaign donations in the state of Florida, which means they would no longer be giving money to Florida Republicans. And now the message becomes much clearer. Support our positions and give us money or we'll punish you. Stop giving us money and we'll punish you. And that's the main premise I'm getting at here. If campaign contributions are an expectation as a course of business, if pay to play is necessary to get things done, and businesses that don't give the money are targeted or punished in some way, how far off is it from the scenarios with the owner of the small pizza business I opened up with? How much different is it really functionally from bribery? Or take it even a little further to essentially receiving treatment the equivalent of, hey, it's a nice little business you have here. Be ashamed if something happened to it if you don't engage in that pay to play. Now, it's not exactly the same. There are certainly major distinctions, but the similarities there are too glaring to simply dismiss. Now, the bribery similarities are one interpretation. Another is that since Disney stopped funding their campaigns, they no longer felt beholden to the company, no longer had anything to lose by speaking out against them. Kind of goes hand in hand with what I was talking about. It bolsters the point about the corrosive influence of private money funding political campaigns. It works toward advancing whatever is in the best interests of the very few who have the ability to wield this influence, not what's in the best interests of the vast majority of us. Now, look. Do I care much about DeSantis and other Florida Republicans versus Disney? No, not really. It's largely a meaningless, made-up fight anyway at the end of the day. And don't mistake what I'm saying here as mounting some kind of major defense for Disney. Disney is not a saint in all this. They're happy to participate in this pay-to-play system to get special breaks and favors, to minimize their tax burden, to avoid paying and treating their workers fairly, to grow a monopoly over the entertainment industry, to constantly raise prices to squeeze as much as they can out of their customers while cutting millions of families off from being able to go at all, to minimize their costs by producing their goods in Chinese sweat sweatshops. Do I really need to go on? And that's another aspect about this whole thing that makes it really much hollower than it appears on the surface. Why not go after any of that? If this were really about getting at Disney and punishing them, there are plenty of better ways to do it. Lots of material to work with. So why the special tax status? After all, it may not actually end up hurting Disney very much. It'll slow down some of their projects, but otherwise they may actually end up saving tons of money on the deal, as the money they used to pay toward their infrastructure will now fall on the backs of property owners in those counties, raising their taxes substantially unless something is done to change it. So if the intention was actually to harm Disney, they didn't do a very good job. But now Disney gets to look like a victim being attacked by politicians using government power to punish those who disagree with them, and Republicans get to look like heroes to their base by sticking it to a woke company and owning the libs, which seems to be what matters most to them these days. Well, that and tax breaks that funnel more and more money away from people who need it toward those that don't. Can't forget about those tax cuts. All the while, regular folks who have and want nothing to do with any of this and are just trying to live their lives are the ones who are going to be hurt by it, as usual. This constant effort to exploit cultural differences and turn them into a culture war is doing real damage. Though it's certainly nothing new. We've been in the midst of these culture wars for decades with just different flavors and coats of paint along the way. But at the same time, it's pretty stupid and a waste of time and energy, and ultimately just a distraction from more important issues. Issues that actually impact all of our lives. None of which these politicians are doing a damn thing about. Which is why I use this particular case to put the spotlight on some of them. Now, to go back to the main point. Even though I made some direct comparisons to similarities of campaign contributions with bribery, of course legally they're definitely not the same. But that could easily be changed. Just like a bill was introduced, passed, and signed in a matter of days, eliminating a governing agreement that had been in place for over 50 years, all it takes is 51% votes in both legislative chambers, one signature, and bam! Private campaign donations are now illegal, and we have a public system of financing elections. Will it be challenged on First Amendment grounds in court? Of course, as this Florida law retaliating against Disney will likely be challenged on the same grounds. Didn't stop him from doing it though. And Democrats aren't blameless here. They're seemingly happy to have the boogeyman of the far-right Republicans they can point to as a convenient excuse to not actually have to do anything to improve people's lives, except for little things here and there on the margins, with the attitude of, well, people will have to vote for us because the other guys are just so much worse, they'll have no choice. And around we go on this seemingly perpetual cycle of stupid where nothing ever gets done, nothing is accomplished, nothing ever changes. The bottom line is we don't need to just accept all of this as just the way it is. We shouldn't just accept our laws and government being wielded for the sole purpose of attacking political opponents, or amounting to little more than performative political theater, or only working for those with enough money to pay for it. We can and should demand better. We should demand more. The question is, will we?